the perspective I'm coming from. So I just want to make that clear, how I'm talking today. So we've got a lot of stuff to get through, but the goal isn't for me to get through my PowerPoints. I'll put it that way. The goal is for this to be helpful. So if you've got any questions at any time, just interrupt. Please interrupt. Or if it's like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. What about this? Just interrupt. Or I want to hear more about that. Please just interrupt. Because we want it to be helpful. So anyway, we'll see how we go, hey? We'll crack on and we'll see how we go. So we're going to talk about, in this first part, we're going to talk a bit more about actually what is mental health. And to be honest, according to the ABS, mental health is a huge issue. It's a huge issue. In Australia, 1 in 2 of us over our adult lives will experience what could be described as a diagnosable, commonly occurring mental health condition. 1 in 2 of us across our lives. The latest ABS data that just come out, particularly given the last couple of years we have, 1 in 5 adults each year will experience one of the commonly occurring mental health issues. Over the past 2 years, the primary categories of those actually are women in the 14 to 30 age group. Over the past couple of years, 3.3 million people have been experiencing some kind of an anxiety disorder. Mental health issues are really, really common, actually, in Australia, around the world, particularly the last couple of years. And untreated, like mental health disorders, they can result in pretty significant suffering. There's community costs associated to that. There's disruptions in relationships. Work and educational issues can be impacted. Home life is impacted. Even our spiritual lives and our Christian communities can be impacted. Mental health issues, they don't discriminate. They affect all people, actually, of all ages, genders, religious or not. And so we want to discuss, actually, in this first thing, well, what do people mean when they say the word mental health issues? Let's just start there. What on earth does that mean when people say that kind of thing? Well, really, what mental health issues, quote unquote, means is it's just this pretty broad term for a whole lot of things. So what I've done is I've just tried to categorise them into 6 broad buckets to kind of give you a bit of a sense of, well, when people say mental health issues, what do they mean? Let me tell you, there's probably 6 big buckets. So let me just roll through them. Number 1, we could describe things of what we might call mood disorders. Now, mood disorders, they're usually a whole range of unwanted, kind of usually sad feelings that kind of just don't go away. Depressive disorders, and there's a number of them, they're categorised by 2 big features. Number 1, a persistent low mood that won't budge. And number 2, I'm no longer finding joy or pleasure in life, particularly in areas where I usually find joy and pleasure. Those 2 things are kind of like the big categories, big definers of what is called a mood disorder or a depressive disorder. But sometimes mood disorders occur not just with a low mood, but sometimes there can be this kind of high mood, a kind of a manic activity and overly unrealistic, grandiose ideas. That's called a manic episode. And sometimes that occurs with then a corresponding depressive episode, and that's what's called bipolar mood disorder. A lot of footy players come out with bipolar disorder after a while, but that's simply what it is. It's those 2 kinds of things. So mood disorders might be one kind of category of what people might call mental health issues. And the prevalence around Australia amongst women is about 5.1%, amongst men is about 3.2%. So 1 in 20, 25 of us each year will probably fit into that category of some type of a mood disorder. But mood disorders, like I indicated before, they're not the most prevalent category in Australia. The most prevalent category is anxiety disorders. Now, anxiety is a good thing. You've got to hear me say that. Anxiety is a good thing. It's a God-given process to keep us alert, to get us vigilant, to make sure we're, going to be safe. But if that situation persists or prolongs in a bad way, it can really start to impact my life. And that's where we might start to think, well, this is more than just being a little bit vigilant. Actually, this is now causing problems in my life. And that's where a person might meet criteria for an anxiety disorder. There's a number of different anxiety disorders I put up, which are up there, and I don't know if they're on your handout, but anyway, here's a few different types. One's called Generalized Anxiety Disorder. That's where I kind of have like this free-floating anxiety that I will attach it to everyday items, and they'll become big things. It's sort of like this, it's a generalised anxiety disorder I will attach to something or other. Well, I feel a bit anxious today. Why am I feeling anxious? Oh, as soon as I ask that question, let me tell you, I'm going to find things to be anxious about. But there's this generalised free-floatingness, and it might go from one thing to the other, about everyday items. That's generalised anxiety disorder. There's social anxiety disorder, and that's that kind of disorder where I feel great anxiety in social situations. Maybe I'll make a fool of myself. Maybe people reject me. So it's a social-oriented anxiety, and so I'll start to avoid social situations, and that might then lead to problems in life as a result of that. Panic attacks. Panic attacks is where we have a sudden flush of anxiety that's usually accompanied by misattributions of physiological symptoms. What I mean by that is this. I just feel anxious. I might not even be aware that I'm feeling anxious, but then I might start to feel a physiological reaction with anxiety, like a beating heart rate, or I'm hyperventilating a little bit. And I think I misattribute what those physiological symptoms mean. I'm having a heart attack. What do you think is going to happen if I think maybe I'm having a heart attack? What do you think my anxiety is going to do? It's going to go up. What do you think that's going to do then to my physiological reactions? That's going to go up too. And so there is this terrifying... panic attacks are terrifying because what's going on? What's going on? But it's actually a flush of anxiety and then a misattribution of what's actually going on, which makes it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So it could be heart, it could be breathing, etc., etc. That's a panic attack, that's spiralling up. Phobic disorders is when there's a particular fear. It's an over-exaggerated fear of a particular stimuli. So, I don't like snakes. Am I snake phobic? No, because they can be dangerous. But peanut butter, there's nothing to be afraid of peanut butter, but sometimes I might have a phobia against something. I'm just trying to say, what phobias are is it's not just being afraid. It's the exaggeration of the anxious response in a way that is out of proportion, and it's now causing problems in my life. So I hope you're hearing some of those similar things. Anxiety disorders are very common, even before what's happened in the past couple of years. About 1 in 8 Australians every year meet criteria for anxiety disorder. It's a big thing. So we're talking about buckets of types of mental health issues. What do we mean by that? There's mood stuff we might think about. We might think about anxiety stuff. The next stuff is a bit similar. It's called trauma or stress-related disorders. Now, as soon as you hear trauma, we think post-traumatic stress disorder. We hear about that. What post-traumatic stress disorder is a disorder that follows what's called a potentially traumatic event. So, 50 to 70% of us will have pretty traumatic events happen in our lives. The kinds of things like exposure to actual or threatened death, serious physical or sexual or emotional violence, like traumatic things. 50 to 70% of us. But not everyone develops post-traumatic stress disorder from those things. What post-traumatic stress disorder is after 6 or 12 months after such an event, I'm still having stress-related experiences related to that. So it's not just having a stressful thing. It's actually that it doesn't go away. The stress response is on. And so the key features of post-traumatic stress disorder after that period of time is an unwanted re-experiencing of the traumatic event. maybe through memories that I can't control or I don't want to have, or tangential reminders or dreams, but there's an unwanted re-experiencing. That's the key thing. And it's also accompanied usually by avoidance of reminders, negative mood or beliefs about the self, the world, the future, and increased physiological arousal. My stress response is on, and it doesn't switch off. That's post-traumatic stress disorder. It's because the traumatic event, which is going to be traumatic for everyone, but actually it hasn't resolved, and that might need some help to resolve. About 1 million Australians experience PTSD at the time. There's other things I mentioned down there, obsessive compulsive disorder. Now that is not just, being particular. The world works better if you hang your socks up paired next to each other from the toes down. That's just the way the world should work. That's not OCD. What OCD is that I have troubling thoughts or urges. I don't like them. They're almost obsessional. They might even be magical. I fear this is going to happen, or that's going to happen, or what if this happens, or if I think about it, it's going to... There's some type of an obsession. It's an unwanted, distressing thought or urge. And that gets paired with a compulsion to control that by doing this. It might be related, it might not be related, but I found that if I do that, it kind of reduces the anxiety somehow for me. So there it gets this pairing of an obsessive thought or unwanted thought with some type of behaviour to control it, and it starts to actually bleed into other areas of life and take over my life. That's what OCD is. It's not the socks. That's okay. Or maybe that's something else, I don't know. But anyway, that's what OCD is. And then I also mentioned eating disorders in there. They really deserve a position for their own, but I'm just going to put it in that kind of bucket. So eating disorders. The next category, though, is a little bit different. It's called psychotic or thought disorders. Now, psychosis, I think like it says up there, is basically, what that means is I just can't trust my sense experience at the moment. Or thought disorders is where I'm having erratic thoughts all over the place, can't kind of concentrate. That feels quite different, doesn't it, to some of the other buckets we've talked about so far. It's like it's a different kettle of fish, but it's a different type of thing. Schizophrenia is an example of a thought disorder that may or may not have elements of psychosis associated to it. But basically, when you think psychosis, it's like, I just can't trust my senses at the moment, for whatever reason. That's what that is. Worldwide, schizophrenia is about 1% of the population, worldwide. So it's kind of interesting. It's more probably the highly genetic issues there. And then the other group that's a bit different too is called personality disorders. Now, our personality, what personality means is personality simply means my preferences for how I like to think and behave. That's all personality is. We have different personalities, it makes life interesting. Personality disorder is where those preferences for thinking and behaving become so extreme that they really start to make living life and relationships hard. Particular ways relating, that's called a personality disorder. There's different types or clusters of personality disorders. The one up there is related to the cluster B type of personality disorders, and they're the ones you probably hear more about. Antisocial personality disorder is where a person has no anxious response about violating the rights or desires of other people. Antisocial personality disorder. What else we've got there? Borderline personality disorder. That's really characterised by a person who has a very they don't really have much of their identity is very diffuse, it's not fixed, it's huge emotional, affective instability that's unpredictable. Histrionic personality disorder is a bit of a highly loving attention-seeking, performing kind of stuff. Keep moving. Narcissistic personality disorder, that's really actually about a very damaged sense of self. I know it presents as people needing to be admired greatly, but that's actually not because they've got a big head. It's actually because they think they're not, and that's their big protective mechanism. So there's personality disorders. So we're building up a bit of a category of what do we mean by mental health stuff? mood, anxiety, trauma, stress, psychosis, personality, and then my favourite category, other. Classic psychologists. We just put this in the other bucket. And so what we mean by other is just, actually it covers a whole lot of different things. As it says there, they might be developmental disorders or things that happen in geriatric cognitive related disorders. The big one in Australia is substance use disorders. They might be substance abuse or substance dependence. 1 in 4 Australians meet criteria for a substance use disorder, because it's a badge of honour, you know. Anyway, that's another topic. Substance use disorders, but the big ones on the rise is the kind of more the behavioural quote unquote addictions or habitual behaviours related to gambling and porn use. Over the past 20 years and the past 5 or 10 years particularly, gambling is just on the rise. As is porn use, because it's anonymous now, it's affordable now, and it's accessible everywhere. The AAA engine of porn use. So what is mental health? That's kind of mental health, actually. And the ones that are most common are then the highlighted ones that's up there. Now, what I want to say, which is really important, is that there's really a sliding scale in severity when discussing mental health issues. Mental health stuff, it's not like a disease you catch, like you have a virus or you don't have a virus. Mental health stuff isn't like that. It's actually a continuum between feeling really good, going fine, all the way down to debilitating disease or struggling. Now, in life, we all fluctuate on that continuum. We all have things that go on that kind of cause problems. Death of a loved one. It's going to cause a fluctuation. Is that a problem? No. So we all are going to fluctuate on that continuum in life. However, there's going to be times when I actually might stop bouncing back up, or I find that actually, you know what, I just kind of feel like I'm getting stuck down here. That's probably a time when it might be helpful to get some help. We all have fluctuations in terms of our mental health continuum. All of those 6 categories actually are on a continuum. So what I want to say straight up is that just because I might not reach some technical diagnosis doesn't mean it's not significant for me. Yes, the psychiatric and psychological communities, they have drawn lines in the sand that say, somewhere on the continuum past here, we'll call that a diagnosis. But that's actually more about communication of severity amongst professionals than like some legitimate, designation. What if I'm just here? It's going to be, I might want some help. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to think about fluctuations. And if I feel like I'm getting stuck, I shouldn't, be ashamed to get some help. Like my weight fluctuates, my physical health fluctuates, and there's seasons where I'm like, you know what, I need to join a gym. I need to get a boot camp or something, something to give me a bit of help to bounce back and get stable again. The same is true with our mental health, I want to say. So we need to watch our own fluctuations and others' fluctuations. But like I said, there are lines in the sand that are technical definitions. And just in terms of, we think, well, what does that mean? This is what the line in the sand is for major depressive disorder. So what is major depressive disorder? Technically, this is it. Here's 9 different symptoms. If a person meets 5 of those symptoms across a 2-week period, where at least one of them is that low mood or that sense of I get no pleasure from things that usually give me pleasure, if people meet 5 of these criteria, they could get a label, major depressive disorder. What are they? 1 and 2, depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day. 2, marked diminished interest or pleasure in all or most activities. Number 3, significant weight loss when not dying, or weight gain, more than 5%. Insomnia, can't sleep, or hyposomnia, I can't wake up, just tired all the time. Psychomotor agitation, I just can't sit still, or psychomotor retardation nearly every day. Fatigue or loss of energy every day. Feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt, may be delusional, nearly every day, not just self-reproach, but actually major stuff. Diminished ability to think, concentrate, or be indecisive, nearly every day. Recurrent thoughts of death, not just fear of dying, but recurrent suicidal ideation without a specific plan or suicide attempt or a plan. Here's 9 categories, 9 things. And so what's the line in the sand? Well, if I get 5, I can get a diagnosis. But even within the diagnosis, you can actually have mild, moderate, or severe levels, because I might have 4. Do you sort of see what I'm trying to say about there's a line in the sand? But just because I don't get a label doesn't mean it's not significant. And also, just because I get a label doesn't mean that it's super damaging. Now, for some of us in the room, if someone says to me, Grant, actually, what's going on for you is you have social anxiety disorder. Some of us might go, that's it. That's why I feel the way I do. And sometimes actually to be given a diagnosis can help some people, because like, I've realised I've got something. Now I know I can do something about it. Others of us, Grant, what you have is social anxiety disorder. Oh man, some of us then take that really badly. Can you sort of understand those different reactions? So I'm just trying to say, what is mental health issues? It's a fluctuating continuum. It's not so much about a label. It's not like a thing you catch. We all fluctuate. Sometimes our fluctuations are going to get stuck, and it's worthwhile getting some help to kind of help to bounce back up. Does that make sense? Any comments or questions about just that quick introduction? Yeah. That's right. You don't have to. If you're feeling anxious here because it's silence, don't be anxious. I don't care. We've got plenty of stuff we can talk about. But I just want to pause. If there is any questions so far about any that I think I've said, yeah, it's a bit of a natural point.
Would you say that's a fairly comprehensive list as well? That you think that those are pretty much all the categories that psychologists would do?
Like I said, it's the buckets. And the what's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is sort of like the manual that we get these kinds of diagnoses from. But they are structured, so I've kind of broken it up into those. They are the big categories. But like I said, it's not perfectly neat.
There does seem to be a tendency to just stamp mental health on every like you said, footy players, right? You hear it all the time, right?
Yeah.
Mental health.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, they're just having a bit of a rough time, or do they have a mental illness?
And again, that's why language is important, because you know what, I can be struggling in my mental health, but not have a quote unquote illness. And what do we mean by quote unquote illness? Well, it's just getting 5 or more of those lists. So that's a bit arbitrary, actually. But like I was saying, sometimes language is important and helpful for some of us, because I'm like, but sometimes it's not helpful for us. So these things are fluid. That's why for me, it's much more better to think about, hey, if I'm struggling with my weight, go to the gym, Grant. Don't just sit at home doing nothing. If I'm struggling with mental health, don't wait till it's really bad. Get help earlier. So it's complicated, because as soon as people talk about mental health issue X, then all of a sudden we all go, oh, maybe I feel like that. And then, so all of this kind of stuff it's a bit rubbery, is what I'm trying to say. But the behind it is the fluctuation. And if I'm struggling, if it's impacting my life, we should get some help, I'd say. Why not? Yeah. We all struggle, 1 in 2 of us. 1 in 2. Yeah.
Do you believe in chemical imbalances in the brain causing depression?
100%. Well, actually, it's complicated. Great.
Or is it all like circumstances?
What a wonderful question. Mate, you deserve a chocolate on the way out. Let's talk about causes. Now, when I say causes, actually, that's why I put it in inverted commas, that's the wrong way to think. What's a better way to think is think risk factors. When risk factors pile up in my life, I might help a bit. Yeah.
Actually, sorry, Grant, can we go back just one? Actually, no, not to the slides, just before we get into the courses.
Sure.
You were talking about population increases in the last 5 to 10 years. Is that because of increasing in people being diagnosed, or more people seeking out mental health things, and so it's a rise like that?
Yes.
Which one?
Yes. Absolutely both.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that a little bit later about the last 2 years. But the massive increase in stress in most people's lives increases a movement towards more fluctuations where I'm stuck. Yeah. So that's still on this issue. So let's talk a little bit about, what are some of the risk factors, or where does mental health issues come from? Well, number one is family history and genetics. And so, particularly with anxiety and mood-related disorders, people are 1.5 to 3 times more likely to experience such mental health issues if a first-degree relative suffers also. That's me. My dad struggles with this. So there actually there's a genetic component, particularly to some of them more than others, but there is a genetic component to these kinds of experiences, which relates then, you might say, to maybe there's brain chemistry. It's a genetic issue. But that's more of a risk factor, I would say, than a deliberate cause. Because usually there's always some kind of a psychosocial stressor that kind of pops me over, like a pandemic, or something else. There's some trigger, maybe just bad work stress, or I'm relocating to living in another country or another state. The tension's there. A relationship breakup, the loss of someone significant, the death of someone significant, I lose my job, financial stress, a car accident, family tension, becoming a parent. These are all things that cause stress in someone's life. And so that's going to raise stuff up. And maybe that might interact if I have maybe a bit of but maybe not. Anyone might just pop. So it's another risk factor. Chronic medical conditions. Things particularly like where there's just a general ongoing decline long term, where it's very, very difficult. That's wearing on someone. That's a risk factor for developing mental health issues. Substance dependence, huge factor, how we use substances. Poor sleep. I just don't get enough sleep. That is a big factor for mental health issues. Huge factor, actually. Past trauma. That's another factor. So really, when we talk about where does this stuff come from, it's just not simple, actually. It's probably an interaction that looks like this. Maybe I might have one or more of these things going on. See, there's the biological influence that you mentioned. But maybe there's some social factors, and I've got some emotional cognitive influences, I'm doing some stuff that's not good. And then some huge trigger comes along, it kind of interacts with all this stuff, and I might meet criteria. So this is just not simple, actually. It's not like there's usually a cause. There's usually multiple things going on in someone's life that kind of lead to these fluctuations. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. So brain chemistry certainly might be involved. If it didn't start with it, it will certainly be there after a while. what comes first, sometimes we're not sure. Yeah. So great question. So what's some tips then? Well, let's just talk about some general tips. Number one, get in early, get in often. That's what I would say. Early detection is always important because when you're milder on the fluctuation thing, there's always more treatment options which have greater efficacy. The longer I leave it, the harder it can be to bounce out. So early detection is really important. Another couple of features that's on your handout as well. Just want to help people to speak honestly about what's going on. It's great you're here today. I would say we want to walk in the light because, yeah, I can be honest with you because Jesus accepted me and I'm complete in him. He loves me. And so I can tell you that, you know what, I struggled last half of the year. I work in psychology stuff. I really struggled with my mental health. My daughter really struggles with mental health. But we can be honest with each other in Christ and work together. We can speak honestly together, knowing that actually my worth isn't based on whether my mental health is good or not, to be honest. Anyway, speak honestly is really important to key others. Parents, organisational resources, church contacts, friends. I want to say too, you need to access the right resource for the right issue. So if you're struggling with mental health issues, I would say access appropriate professional help. We've got GPs, we've got counsellors, we've got social workers, got psychologists, got clinical psychologists, got psychiatrists. You might be thinking, which one? Which one do I go to? And to be honest, there's lots of political answers to that. Everyone's out to protect their own patch. But in Australia, your first point of call is your GP. In Australia, the way the system works is you go to your GP first and your GP will refer you. So that's really important. So it's simple, actually. Go to your GP and just share about what's going on, and then your GP will assist you in actually referring you, and Medicare can assist with meeting some of those costs where you go from there. So I hope that makes sense. There's some other tips down there about how can I be supportive, what doesn't help, what if the person that I'm trying to encourage doesn't want to get help. There's some tips down there as well. But I'm just wondering, how are we going for time? I just wanted to ask you the question. Maybe there's a few questions up here. Just turn to a person next to you. Just give you a chance to have a quick comment. If you suffered from depression as a Christian, what would you find difficult what would you find difficult in sharing your struggles with others at church? What's some of the benefits? Do you think depression is a spiritual problem, a psychological problem, or a physical problem? Should a Christian consult a non-Christian psychologist or psychiatrist? Why not? You only have 2 minutes, so pick a question, pick a question, and just have a bit of a chat, and then I'll bring us back. Yeah. So, 2 minutes. I got my thing going.
I know, like I said, they're not meant to be condescending, but there is a little bit of becomes a little bit hard to get you always differentiate, especially when you're part of the show. How there is this world's broken and there is That kind of like flowed back.
All right, guys, that's 2 minutes, I'm afraid. Sorry. Would anyone like to make a comment about any of those? Just something that someone else said, or you thought, oh, that was a good point. Yeah.
I'll say on the last question, of the last point, I know someone that sees regularly a psychiatrist, and they actually go to both a non-Christian and a Christian to get thing, because they originally went to a Christian psychiatrist, and that worked out okay, but then they went to a non-Christian, and they seemed to that worked out well for them. So I'm interested to know where you stand and what you do, because from that point of view, is I was going to see both the positive thing from the but
Yeah, great reflection. Yeah, thanks for sharing about that. Your friend's experience too. Yeah. Well, that is my next topic. So, yes, before I jump on, again, perfect. You guys are great. but did anyone want to make any other comments before I go into that issue? Or,
Well, I just have a question. I was thinking that one of the benefits of sharing is destigmatization, right? So like everyone else feels more comfortable sharing as well. Are there any things we can do to destigmatize mental health actively besides just like talking about it more?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yes. Yeah. But I think just walking in the light is just good. I just think yes. So just talking about it. How's your week been? My week been pretty medium actually, because actually I've just been having some ups and downs. But it's been pretty normal actually. But it's all right. You don't have to make it a big thing all the time. So I would say just including it, just being honest actually. So for me in sermons, I will often try to include something about same-sex attraction, porn use, domestic violence, mental health issues, as well as greed and, struggling with X, Y, Z. Sometimes I just think we focus on some things more than others. But we're probably all struggling with all of them. It's not just having a talk on porn. That's helpful, but sometimes that can actually mean, it must be a big issue, and then we never talk about it anymore. So trying to be a bit real, without meaning that just because I have this doesn't mean it's totally abnormal. Sorry, I'm just blabbing on. I haven't really said anything. Good question. I haven't answered it well. All right, moving on. but anyway, that's certainly what I would say. Yeah, we all have our own newsletter stories that we present, and that's okay, unless it's just a front. But, yeah, anyway, we better move on. So I just want to say that from my perspective, biblically, I would say the human person is a unitary being. I think the Hebrew conception of the person is unitary. However, the Bible does speak about people from different perspectives, or you might be able to say from different lenses. It doesn't mean people are 3 parts or 2 parts. No, but it does speak about people in some ways from 3 different perspectives. So we are psychological beings, we are willful beings, we are emotional, rational beings. The Bible speaks of us like that. We're physical beings. Offer your soma, your body, as a living sacrifice. That's your everything. So we're physical beings. The Bible can speak about us as like that. The Bible can speak of us about being spiritual beings. We're spiritually animated beings that have capacity to relate with God. Now that doesn't mean we're three bits. We're much more overlapped than that. But it can look at people from different perspectives is what I would want to say. Now, why do I bring that up? Because sometimes when there's a problem, it might be helpful to look at the issue from one particular perspective more than the others. If I break my leg walking out of the door here, I really hope you're going to call the ambulance, not my minister. Because that's pretty clearly a physical issue, right? Is it a psychological issue? Sorry?
Sure. You will have some psychological issues.
Maybe. So the answer is maybe.
If we don't call you.
True, absolutely true. So maybe I break my leg and actually that's fine. But if it was 4 weeks ago and I've been preparing for the Commonwealth Games that's just kicked off, and I break my leg, and I've been preparing for this for at least 2 years. It's part of my program to get to, the next Olympics, whatever. This has really stuffed me up. So it's a physical issue, but it might have a fair bit of emotional, fluctuations there. Is it a spiritual issue? Well, again, maybe, maybe not. Maybe actually it might bring up issues of why did God allow this to happen to me? And it's just a simple example, but all I'm trying to say is that sometimes an issue might land more in one area than another. Sometimes an issue might have very clear overlaps between 2 areas or even 3 areas, but not always. So what am I trying to say? So for some psychological issues, sometimes it's bang right there. Sometimes the psychological issue might not play a factor in terms of physiology and might not have an impact on me spiritually. And so maybe that's totally appropriate. Sometimes there might be multiple factors that go on. What's inappropriate if I break my leg is if my treating physician gives me spiritual counsel. Because that's not their area of expertise. If it was my son who broke his leg and that the treating physician was from another faith's perspective and they're giving him spiritual counsel, I'm not going to be happy about that because that's not why they're going to that person. Does that make sense? So, for me, it's important to have access to the right care from the right professional in their right boundaries of expertise. So for me, when someone says they see me, I'm a Christian, and I don't see many people, but anyway, I usually see people who are highly religious. So usually there'll be something in this zone, but I'm treating them primarily from a psychological perspective. But what I'm making sure is that they're talking with their minister about their theodicy issues. So it's a shared care model. I'm always ask them to go see their GP and talk to their GP about iron levels or whatever else as well. But that's not my bag because they're not seeing me from that perspective, if that makes sense. So it's probably a little bit illegitimate for me to stray out of my boundaries and be making strong pronouncements. So professionally, I think that's an appropriate way to go. So I think a person can see a non-Christian psychologist just as you can see a non-Christian dentist. But if your dentist, while he's drilling you, is, giving you dodgy spiritual advice, well, I'd say that's going to be a problem. So you need to be talking with your minister then. Now, wisdom is required to discern the boundaries. That's without a doubt. That's why I would always encourage someone, as a believer, to be if you're accessing good help, then make sure you're accessing good help from other perspectives that can assist with that, to give you a holistic perspective. I would say, see, if it's for a particular psychological issue, some are a little more clearer than others, to be honest. But I would say, see a good one. I want to see a good dentist, not just a Christian dentist. And I want to be getting good counsel from my minister or leader or something like that. So that's a good issue. You know, I think we might just have a bit of a pause, but all I wanted to mean by that is you just got to be aware of reductionism in this stuff. There's that old thing, if all you have is a hammer, you treat everything like a nail. And that is very true with these issues. Some psychologists are totally reductionistic. It's all psychological. Don't worry about that spiritual stuff. That's, you know, just an exalted father figure and blah, 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 blah. It's nothing but X, Y, Z. That's reductionistic for me, actually. Some physicians are reductionistic. Don't worry about this psychological mumbo-jumbo. What you need is brain chemical help. Now, that might be true, but I'd say that's reductionistic as well. It's nothing but brain chemical. Sometimes as Christians, we can be reductionistic. Don't worry about seeing a blah or seeing an X or you really need to just meditate on this verse and own it. I'm sure that, yes, that's true, but that could be reductionistic. Beware of nothing buttery. It's nothing, when you hear those phrases, it's nothing but, just God has made this world beautiful and complex. And I think you want to make sure you're getting the right help from the right person in their right field, and making sure you're meeting each of the right. You're having people speak in from those right. Anyway, okay, we need to have a bit of a break. Let's have a bit of a break for a bit. If you want to have some discussion about that, that'd be great. Happy to do that. When we come back, we're going to be drilling down into the issue of stress and anxiety particularly. So I want to cover that. So we'll see how we go. So if we have a break for 10 minutes, if we have a break for 10 minutes, that'd be great. And then we'll come back and we'll get into stress and anxiety. Awesome. Yep. Yep.
10 minutes before school.
Yep, that's right. Right. Hurry. So I wanted to just drill down. I mentioned depression a little bit the last hour. I thought this time I might talk a little bit more about anxiety, just to get a bit of a deeper dive there, because it is just so chronic in our experience today. But you know what? That's not unusual. It really is a very common and difficult human condition. In fact, it's a major recurrent theme in the Bible. You know, often you hear the phrase, what's the most commonly occurring command from God in the Bible? The answer is, fear not. Do not fear. Do not be afraid. Man, don't you think that's interesting? Think about all the things that God could say to his people, and what's the thing he says the most? So it's obvious, actually, that God knows this is a particular issue, that he needs to talk to us a lot about saying, actually, Grant, don't fear, but instead trust in me. A lot. A lot. Someone says there's 365 fear nots in the Bible. I have not been able to find 365, but there is a lot. And so that's a really big thing. Like I said before, though, anxiety is not bad. It's actually okay. But it's problematic when those feelings don't go away and it starts to interfere. So what I want to do in this session is just discuss stress and anxiety from a psychological perspective, specifically the underlying psychological process that's involved, so that can help inform you in how to cope with it. And then also to specifically, as a Christian psychologist, discuss how and where knowing God personally provides additional resources, particularly relevant for managing anxiety. So I did want to have you just think a little bit about this question. What are some of your symptoms of stress, anxiety? What helps you to cope? But I might just forego that. There's other discussions coming up, but I just want you to think about, like, how do you know when you're anxious? What's your tell signs? And what do you do at the moment to cope? That was my little introduction discussion, but I might just push on, actually. So, because I wanted to take a step back first and just think about, what is stress? What is anxiety anyway? Because what's really important to say, that anxiety or stress is a process. It's not a thing. Technically, it's a process of interaction between an individual and their environment. And now that is important when you come to think about, how do I manage it? So the first step in that anxious process is what we might call the presence of a stressor in the environment. Now, all that means is the stressor is the thing around me or in my imagined future that's causing me to feel stressed, okay? So the stressor is just the thing. What is it that's causing you to feel stressed? That's the stressor. Or we might have lots of stressors, but the stressor or the trigger or whatever it is leads to that emotion or that experience of stress or anxiety. We'll call it strain, just because stress or anxiety is the whole process, okay? So the stressor or the thing that's the cause leads to the strain, which is all those kinds of physiological effects. You know, the amygdala kicks off and it spurts neurochemicals into my frontal lobe, and so I just can't think straight. It's kind of hard to think. And my central nervous system gets going and I breathe shallower. There's not enough oxygen in my brain. It's more out into the skeletal muscles. You know, the liver secretes a carbohydrate, which I'm not as hungry. I feel a bit fun. That's all the stress. That's all the strain reaction. But the thing is that different people can have different strain reactions to similar stressors. For example, some people might experience one particular strain, one particular stressor as like a kind of a positive challenge. If I can cope with it, this could be a really good thing. It's like a challenge. For example, let's say that you're asked to do some kind of a presentation of a major project at work before major stakeholders. Some of us in the room might go, all right. You know, speaking in front of people, it kind of focuses my mind in preparation. I don't have to rely on those other flaky guys in my team. You know, I've got the potential here to do well for us, actually. I reckon this could be good. It's a positive challenge. But then others might have that same stressor and see it as a real threat. I hate speaking in public. I'm hopeless at it. I'm probably going to blow the whole project because I suck at it. Now, what those different reactions to the very same stressor suggest is that between the stressor and our strain reaction is this mediating cognitive process. So we view it, we interpret it through our cognitions, our thinking habits. And that, by and large, can have a big impact on the experience of the strain, of the stressor. So basically what that means is that, it says up there, and it says on your handout too, there's two types of appraisals. It's called a primary appraisal and a secondary appraisal. Primary appraisal simply means when I'm looking at the stressor, what do I see? Like, how do I interpret it? What am I thinking about? What's the triggers in my thinking related to that? Primary appraisals is about what do I see? Secondary appraisals is about what do I see in terms of me and what resources I have to deal with the stressor itself. So they're the two differences. Primary is about what do I see? What do I see when I'm thinking about the stressor? Secondary appraisal is what do I see in terms of do I have the resources to cope or access to resources to help me cope? Those two things, they kind of give us then a kind of a grid in terms of how those two appraisals can interact together. So, for example, if I see, let's go back to our oral presentation. If I see the task of doing the speaking up front as like a positive challenge, as like quite positive, this could be quite positive, and I think, you know what, I know a fair bit about this topic, I've got access to some library resources, and I've got a good friend who gave this presentation before who can help coach me, I'm going to feel pretty positive about it. It's a positive challenge. But if let's say that's the positive primary appraisal, positive secondary, but if I kind of see this is a disaster, I think I could really blow our whole company if I stuff this up. It's really threatening. And you know what? I'm no good at doing this. I don't know nothing about this topic really. I've just got to do it. So you see that's the negative view of what I see, the negative view of I don't think I can have it, I don't have what it takes to cope. That's going to be much more of an anxious, paralysing fear.
Grant, so I'm hoping what you're talking about is attitudinal, but is it?
No, it's actually cognitive. It's the way we are thinking and believing.
Yes.
And so it's what am I seeing about that, and what am I seeing about this? That can have an effect on exacerbating the strain. Yeah.
So just jumping off on Jared's point, is this are the appraisals kind of voluntary, or is it kind of?
It's automatic.
It's automatic.
It's habitual, is what it is. So in our brains, we have these things called neural pathways, which actually kind of, once we have these types of thoughts more and more, the neural pathway gets stronger and thicker. And it's kind of like, difference between driving on a bush track versus the Monash. When the neural pathway is fresh, we haven't quite figured stuff out, it's kind of like bush bashing. But if I keep on bush bashing, well, I'll lay some tar, and then eventually it becomes the Monash. As soon as you get on it, bang, this trigger, it goes. So it's about habitual cognitive processing, yeah.
What happens if you jump in between the two? I can do this, I can't do this. And how can you channel it into the challenging?
Mate, your questions are always spot on. We're going to talk about the channeling in a moment. But first, I'm just trying to explain what's going on. So what is stress and anxiety? It's this process. There's something in our environment or it's going on that I'm thinking about that's our stressor. It's the thing that's the worrying thing. Now, I interpret that in my head. And also then that generates the experience of the stress or the strain on me. That's what anxiety is. It's this process going on. Now, why is that important? Because if you want to manage your stress well, we can intervene here, here, and here. It's important to intervene at each step on the process, or maybe think about how could I involve in each step of the process to manage that holistically. If me managing stress or anxiety is simply doing some deep breathing and blah, 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 you think about, well, where are we attacking there? We're just attacking this bit. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to talk about that. It's important. But it's like stress or anxiety is like I've got all these stressors. It's like a river that's flowing down towards my house and I'm trying to cope with it. Now, just intervening here is like I've got a bucket and I'm trying to get the water away as it flows into my front door. Working on that stuff is like getting a bigger bucket. What I'm trying to say is that we need to think about how do I attack the mouth of the river? Not just get a bigger bucket. So it's about, we want to, don't get me wrong, we all need buckets. But we want to think about how do I comprehensively manage this? Does that make sense? What is stress? What is anxiety? It's actually not just a thing, it's actually how I'm interacting with my world around. And there might be really legitimate stressors, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's all in your head, I'm definitely not saying that. So let's talk about one at a time. What's some ideas of how we can engage each part of the process? Number one, let's talk about problem-focused coping. So problem-focused coping is where we actually are taking action to do something directly about the actual stressor itself. So problem-focused coping is the form of coping that has the biggest impact on managing your stress because you're actually doing something about the mouth of the river. Even if I'm not getting rid of it totally, I'm at least engaging it, I'm changing it. That's going to have a big bang for your buck. So number one, step one in problem-focused coping, or I'd say in any kind of stress management or anxious management, is being really clear about what is your stressor. What's on your list? What's going on in your environment? That's the actual problem. So often it's up here in our heads, it's jumbling around. Step one, like on your handout, why not get a bit of paper like on your handout and jot down what are the things that I'm really struggling with. Now often I do that with people and they go, oh, you have no idea, there's too many things. Often clergy say that. I'll just put this out there. Clergy in the room. Often they go, oh, you have no idea. There's too many things, just too many things. I can't be. Tell me. Let's get them out there. What are the things? Financial struggles. I've got a conflict with my wife. I've got this going on and that going on, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's just write them all out. And then let's write them all out. And then actually let's give them a rating out of 10 because they're not all the same. 1 to 10, where 10's absolutely devastating, 1's not. So let's write them all out. Let's figure out which are the really damaging ones, the big ones, and let's rate them as a challenge, a hindrance, or a threat. Because even challenge stressors take energy out of us. This is a challenge stressor for me. Thank you so much for having me. It's very kind of you. This is a challenge stressor for me. But you know what? I'm going to be tired this afternoon. Is that a problem? No? Because I want to do this, but it's going to take it out of me. So we want to get all the things that are out there. Step one, be very clear about what that is. And so I did want to ask you to think about, this is an activity for you. Why not just, not now, sorry, but why not think about what are your stressors? If you're feeling stressed, what is it that's going on? Just be really clear about that. Now, what do we want to do about that? I've written down your handout there just what's called a control grid. Sometimes for me, this is really helpful. This is just simply one way to engage with my stressor list. It's called passing a control grid over each stressor. So if you want to think about each stressor in terms of 2 dimensions, what is it about the stressor that I can control? What is it about the stressor that I can't control? What is it about the stressor that I am doing? What is it about the stressor that I'm not doing? And just kind of thinking about those things, putting a control grid over each stressor is a pretty helpful thing to do, okay? Because there might be things that you can control about that you're doing. Tick. Yep, I've started working on my oral presentation for my stakeholders. There might be some things actually that I can be doing that I'm not doing. You know what? I haven't called my mate who's good at doing these presentations. That's in this category. You know what? I need to step up and do that. Swallow my pride and do that. Because that's going to help me coping with that stress, right? It's going to change how it feels. So when I do a control grid, I want to think about what is it that I can control and what is it particularly that I can control that I'm not doing. Now, sometimes that's helpful to talk that out with someone. Sometimes it's hard doing it by yourself. So get together with someone in church here and say, you know what, I'm really stressed about this. I wonder if you can sit down with me and we can just go through a bit of control grid on it. And they'll say, mate, what else can you do? Let's brainstorm. What else could you do that you're not doing? And then I want to say, we want to move these things up here and draw upon the empowering of God's Spirit for that. He wants to empower you to live in his world. He does. And so you're not alone in trying to do this. He's with you. And so that's what I'd say. Now, there's going to be some things, you know what, that often I worry about that are over here that I can't control. But you know what? I didn't spend all my time worrying about these things, stressing about them that I cannot control. You want to leave them with the Lord. Sometimes because I can't control what the stakeholder might say. I can't control that. I can control what I can do. I can't control what they can do. But you know what I can do? I can commit that to the Lord in prayer. And maybe I might want to write it on a bit of paper, like a prayer, and I might want to physically give it to him, put it on a bowl, on a table, or commit it to the Lord in prayer. And you know what? When that comes up again in my mind, I just need to say, hey, you know what? I can't control that, Lord. I know. I need to refocus on what I can control. I write another prayer. I leave it with you, Lord.
Amen.
So we're trying to engage with your stressor and do something. I work with Power to Change. We don't have any, we're not paid. We raise our own financial support, like lots of Christian mission agencies, right? And that's a stressor in my life. I feel guilty for it, because I should be trusting God. But it's a stressor in my life. I can wake up at 3 a.m. going, oh, Lord, how are we going to get by? Do you know what helps me most with my stress about that? The next day, calling 5 people and saying, hey, do you want to hear about what God's doing in our ministry? And prayerfully consider if you'd like to be a part of it. The thing that blows my stress out of the water the most is doing that. What is that? It's this. So step 1, I would say we want to think about how can you engage your stressor? Be clear about it. What are the big ones? What are the big 9s and 10s and 8s? Which are the big 9s, 10s and 8s that are the hindrances and the threats? Let's start there. And then we'll start moving. That's going to reduce the mouth of your river, so to speak. Step 1. If you can do anything about the stressor, let's do that first. Okay? You might need encouragement. Well, you talk together about that. It's going to be helpful. Does that make sense about that? Know your stressor. Think about what I can do. But you can't always do stuff about it. And so, or sometimes actually the way I'm thinking about it is actually exacerbating it. So that's where we go to process or cognitive process focused coping. Now, with this issue, what we're wanting to do is actually think about it or challenge our thinking about it by looking at it at a different or new, or we might even say more biblical light, if you're a Christian. Still, the treatment of choice for this type of intervention is called cognitive behavioural therapy or some type of cognitive behavioural therapy. And what cognitive behavioural therapy is doing is it's targeting this part of the stress process. particularly. This is based on the fact that, you know what, we all have accumulated sets of default thinking patterns that can create distortions in how we appraise the world and appraise ourselves. And that leads to different thinking and feeling patterns, particularly in ambiguous situations. That then leads to behaviours. Let me give you an example of what I mean here. Let's say that I'm in the new cafe, you know, the Nissan. Is that Nissan, or what's the car company just around the corner? They got a new coffee shop in there, right? It's Nissan or something or other. Anyway, let's say I'm in that coffee shop. I'm having my cup of coffee, and I see Jared walking by at the front. I stand up in the cafe and I say, "Hey, Jared!" Like this. And he just keeps on walking by. We'll call that the event. So here I am, standing in the middle of the coffee shop with my hand in the air, just after yelling at the top of my voice, "Hey, Jared!" And I think straight away, I must look like an absolute goose. And I feel shame and embarrassment straight away. And as soon as I feel that, starting to feel that way promotes even more negative thinking. Like, maybe Jared intentionally snubbed me because he didn't stop and wave back. And then that makes me feel even more anxious and actually rejected and worthless. And then I think, if that's how Jared feels about me, I really must be an awful person, because I know he is a good judge of character and he is loving and giving. So I must really be a terrible person. And then I remember other times in my past where people have kind of rejected me. And now I'm tapping into all these other feelings of worthlessness and shame from the past. And I think, man, I should just give up, because everyone in this cafe now knows what I'm like. Jared knows I'm never going to come to this cafe again. I need to stay away from church as well. Now, the reality is, he just had his earpods in, didn't hear me. But all of a sudden, I'm living in this reality. And it happens like, bang, like that. Now, you might not have those particular thoughts, but we all have them. We all have sensitivities and triggers that, and then next thing you know, we're living in that constructed reality in our heads rather than in God's real world. It's like we all are interpreting the world through our glasses, through lenses of glasses. And what our glasses do, our cognitive field is like those glasses. Now, what our glasses are doing is it sharpens up the environment, right? It helps you process the environment clearer and quicker. That's what our glasses do. But what happens if there's a bit of your glasses that got some funky grinding? Or if there's a big smudge on your glasses? Well, you know what happens? Things get distorted. And that's what's going on for us in our thinking. So the result is that both our thinking and our behaviour can become far away from reality, and for people who are Christians, far away from God's truth. And so what we want to do is actually slow that down. So here's some examples of some of those habits of thought. Those habits of thought we're talking about. So look, I just wonder, actually, I'll read them through, then we will have 2 minutes just to turn to the person next to you and say, do you resonate with any of these? There's lots of them. I just picked out the big 5 that related to anxiety a lot. So do you have any of these, do you notice any of these habits of thought? I've got a few of them, I must say. Number 1, filtering and overgeneralizing. That's where I take negative details in an event and I magnify them and I overgeneralise them, where the positive aspects are filtered out. I might exclusively focus on one issue, polarised thinking. Personalising, where a person believes that everything a person is a personal reaction to them, or they see themselves as the cause of things that they're not responsible for. Have you ever talked to someone and they go, yeah. I'm like, and they're just so bored with me. It's personalising. I don't know whether they looked at their watch. They might have got a message. It might be, iPhone. I watch something, But it's personalising. It must be about me, negatively. Jumping to conclusions without saying so. We know why people are feeling. We know what they're feeling and why they act the way they act. And in particular, we're able to term how people are really feeling about us. Personalising. Catastrophising, the what-ifs. Huge one. We overestimate the worst to happen. We hear about a problem, we use what-if questions. What's that noise outside? What if it's a burglar? What if the burglar can get inside? What if he comes in my room? What if I can't get to sleep tonight? What if I can't then do my presentation tomorrow? What if I lose my job? What if catastrophizing, that I'm living in that world? Shoulds. I have a list of assumptions, rules about how we, others, and life should, ought, or must be. And I feel guilt, shame, or anger when those rules are violated. Well, if I was a good student, I should always get X number of marks. If I was a good, electrician, I should always have a steady flow of work. If I was a good accountant, I would never have conflict with my boss. If I was who says? I should. It's the way I should be. I should be perfect there. My question, just turn to someone next to you. Do you resonate with any of those? These are the habits of thought that... Just a minute or two, yeah.
Together we are anxiety.
Okay, guys, I just want to give you a quick opportunity just to engage around that kind of stuff. So just to say that, these are common. We all have those kinds of, smudges on our glasses, so to speak. And that's okay. The key thing we're trying to do here is to actually try to slow down that spiral process, because it just happens like that, bang. And when it's in our head, actually, we don't even challenge it. It's just we're used to thinking this way. It feels very natural. And so what we're wanting to do is actually, we want to firstly just try to slow down that thinking. Now, a good way to do that is to probably write it out is a helpful way forward. So we're trying to slow down their thinking, actually observe what am I going through in my head, and particularly if you're a Christian, how does that line up with God's perspective on things? Yeah, Romans 12 talks about do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And then you'll be able to test and prove what God's will is good, perfect, better way. That's talking about how do I look at the world from God's perspective? Then it's going to make sense what he wants. What's the right thing to do here? Or in Corinthians, where Paul says, to this end, I taking every thought captive and making it obedient unto Christ. So we're wanting to slow the process down. And on your handout there, you've got a table there. That can be a helpful way for slowing it down. If you're spiralling, I just can't slow it down. Sometimes taking a pen or a pencil and jotting down, writing stuff out can just help get it out of here onto your bit of paper. So this is called a thought log. And I just write down, what emotion am I feeling right now? What rating? Shame and embarrassment, 9. Describe the event that gave rise to the situation, the emotion. Standing here in the middle of the cafe with my arm in the air, yelling out to my mate, you walk by. Describe your thoughts. Now, this is the most important bit in some ways. What's going through your head, Grant? Now, I'd write all that stuff down. Now, I'll be honest with you. When I write that down, I kind of think, oh, Grant, that's part of the issue. I feel embarrassed when I write it down. But that's part of the issue. When it's up there, I don't. I think it's true. When I get it down, I'm like, yeah, I need to get down what's going through my head. What was I expecting would happen? What does this mean? Why is that so bad? I'm just kind of getting it all down there. And then the next column is so important. Is there any alternative ways to look at the situation? Hey, you know what? Yeah, maybe Jared just didn't hear me. I might choose to believe the best. Is there any other biblical way to look at this situation? Yeah, that reminds me that, you know what? Not everyone's going to love me. That's all right. Jesus does. He was actually rejected. And if I'm following him, you know what? Maybe that's going to happen too sometimes. That's all right. So I'm just trying to... Now, after I've written a few of those things down, now what am I feeling? You know what? I'm probably going to still feel shame and embarrassment. But it's probably going to be 6 or 7. Not 9 or 10. That's a win. So this is not some Pollyanna, oh, it's so easy. Anxiety is easy to manage. It's not. But these are the habits of managing it. You don't want to get rid of anxiety. You want to manage it. So that's about primary appraisals. There's something else there in terms of secondary appraisals on the bottom of your page, or what's page 4 in some ways. It says secondary appraisal, coping, the significance of being known by God. Remember, secondary appraisals is about having access to resources or resource myself to be able to cope. Do you know, the majority of times in God's word where he says, fear not, either just before or just after he says something like, for I'm with you. Now this is one of the, in terms of, my research and stuff, this is one of the great things about being a follower of Jesus, is that we have some pretty significant resources available to us. The person of the Lord Jesus. So these are some texts that are really helpful to me. The image up there is of the image of, in Matthew where Jesus feeds the 5,000. And he sends the disciples away while he dismisses the crowd. He goes up and spends time with the Father. And then in the early hours of the morning, the disciples are straining at the doors in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. The wind was against them, it says, and Jesus walks out to them on the water. And they're terrified. He says, it's me. Simon says, if it's you, Lord, tell me to come to you. And Jesus says, come. And Simon gets out of the boat, starts to walk towards Jesus on the water, but the text says, but when he saw the wind, he became afraid and started to go down. Stressor, the wind and the waves. Let me ask you the question. Was Simon Peter's primary appraisals, remember what he's seeing, the wind and the waves, do you think it was distorted or not? I don't think it was. He's a fisherman. He knows the Sea of Galilee. He's in the middle of what, there's this wind of the waves. His primary appraisals were spot on. He became afraid. And then he cries out. And Jesus grabs him and says, do you still have no faith? The issue for Simon Peter was not his primary appraisals. It was a dangerous thing he was doing. The issue was that he had the second person of the Godhead standing on the water next to him. But that's not where he was looking. And so sometimes what assists us, it's not necessarily distorted thinking. Sometimes it's actually the awareness of who you have with you in what you're trying to cope with that makes a difference. So we've got then the primary appraisals and the secondary appraisal interventions. Thinking about that. Okay, we're going to get there. So that's talking about how do we actually manage a little bit about that stuff. Then finally, we want to talk about strain-focused coping. So we're talking about managing at each point. So number one, stressor-focused coping. We talked about being clear about what it is that you're worrying about. Let's put a control grid over it. That's one simple thing you can do. Number two is being aware of what's going on up here. We need to slow that down and actually think, what's another way to think about it that might not be so distorted? And what resources do I have that I can get some help with? People, the Lord. But it doesn't matter how good you are managing the first two, we're going to feel strain. So it is important to bring down our strain reactions, the actual feelings of the stress. Now, stress and strain on anxiety is cumulative. It builds on top of each other. If you've had kids or you've ever read, nieces and nephews, the book Who Sunk the Boat? So it's about, there's all these farmyard animals, they've got a boat, and the pig gets in, the boat goes down, and then the cow gets in, the boat goes down a bit more, and the donkey gets in, and the chickens get in, and finally, the mouse jumps in, and the boat goes under. Who sunk the boat? Well, they all blame the mouse. But like stress, it's cumulative. So we will have things in our lives, and this might be through the day, it might be over the weeks, it might be over a pandemic. But things accumulate. It's like bang, and then I'm up here. Now, when I'm living up here, let's say I wake up, and I remember I've got this meeting on. Oh, okay, I've got to go to the meeting. I jump in the car, and I look, and I see there's no petrol. I'm already stressed. And then now I've got some petrol, and I turn onto the Monash, say, and the Monash is closed. Now I finally get here, and I am buzzing. I'm already close to my red limit. And you know what? It doesn't take much then, just a little stress. Let's say the coffee machine's not working. I can't handle it. I explode. Stress is cumulative. So particularly over the pandemic, let's say if this was our normal, everything is just ratcheted up 2 or 3 points. So actually we've been all probably dancing around that middle red line already. Doesn't take much to then tip me over. What we need actually is strategic methods on how do I reduce that strain. So this is the same diagram, just with 2 strategic points to reduce that strain. Now there's many ways we could talk about this. How do you do that? Interventions for strain reactions are really important. The bucket is really important, don't get me wrong. But they've got to be effective, is what I want to say. Sometimes we're doing things that we think is reducing our strain, it's not. Watching NCSI. Honestly, playing Halo or some other video game. Yeah, this is not popular, but it's not. It's actually stimulating your central nervous system. So I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I like playing Halo. It's good, or whatever it is you like to play. But you just got to be aware of how you're going and what's strategic for you. Sometimes we're not recovering effectively. We might have time off, but we're not recovering. So we need to think about how do I effectively bring that down. There's lots of stuff we can talk about. I just want to mention a 5-finger proposal for a Sabbath time. So when I think about this stuff, I'd say we probably need to think about how do you reduce your strain effectively every day? Every day. How do you effectively reduce your strain every week? And then at key seasons of your year. But as I said, we could talk about a lot about this. But anyway, so here's for me just 5 fingers for reducing your strain. Number 1, watch your diet. So that's important. What substances go into your system have a big impact on your central nervous system. So I'm not sure in this community whether you do drink alcohol or not, but that matters actually. How much or when really matters. Alcohol will affect your sleep. You might think, oh, it helps me get to sleep. It does not help your sleep at all. It makes it worse. Yeah. There's another topic. We'll talk about that in a while. Caffeine, other drugs, actually it matters. So a balanced diet, a wise, can I just be a bit, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to, just a little bit of change here is going to help. So anyway, diet matters. Number 2, exercise. There is nothing that will blow out cortisol and adrenaline than exercise. It's great. It's huge. So I would say it's probably going to be, if you're not exercising, this will be a great way to improve your experience of strain. In terms of strain reduction, the peak time for exercise is between 5 and 7 p.m. 40 minutes of elevated heart rate will make a big difference. Why between that? Because remember, stress is cumulative, so you want to kind of blow it out before you're trying to go to bed. But if you're exercising 40 minutes with elevated heart rate, then probably it's going to take a couple of hours for your system to slow down so you can sleep. Again, that's just doing something is going to be better than nothing. So I tend to exercise in the morning and I ride home as well. But anyway, I'm just giving you what might be a good prescription, but something's better than nothing. It's going to help. Jared, I know you love running. I hate running. I hate it. I hate it with a passion. But I know if I get out on the track, after 20 minutes, my mind will clear. And for me, it's constructive. It's not necessarily enjoyable, but I know it's going to be good for me. So I do like it, but I hate it. Diet, exercise, really key. Number 3 is then relaxation. And I said they're positive emotion generating. For me, there's lots of different things you can do for relaxation. You can do breathing techniques. You can do this. You can do that, whatever. I would just say the goal for relaxation is that it must generate positive emotions. All the research in the last 18 years has been demonstrating this fact. So interesting. So what I mean by positive emotions, I mean a sense of joy. This is all what the literature talks about. Joy, connection, gratitude, thankfulness, something that's constructive, growing. I'm like, my goodness, I'm a Christian. So doing things that actually do that is going to be important. What makes you laugh? Do that. Your spiritual disciplines, do them. They really help on multiple levels. But that's to do with relaxation. Again, we could drill down into that a lot. Now, those first 3 things, what they're really trying to help you to do is sleep. Sleep has a huge impact. And so, I'm talking 8 hours a night. I can't get 8 hours a night. Well, this is what you do. Get up the same time every morning. As close to dawn as you can. Oh yeah, but I'm a night person. Do you think every surfer in the world is a morning person? No. But I've got a reason to get up. So I would just say that. Of course, if we're in shift work, I know it's very difficult. But if you're not in shift work, I would just say the key to sleep, get up the same time every morning. Around as close or reasonable around dawn as possible. Yeah, you'll be tired for a bit, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to get your circadian rhythm back in sync appropriately. So anyway, again, each of these we could spend a whole day on, but just throwing out some ideas. Again, please don't take this harshly. If you can do, I'd say look for a 2% change in these 5 that you can sustain. Don't try to do everything.
So what time do you wake up personally, and what's the rationale for waking up?
because our physiology is wired to daylight hours. So that's why I want to get up I want to get up around dawn, yeah, if I can.
So are you changing throughout the year when you wake up based on relaxations?
Personally, I don't. I try to get up at a certain time every day, and for me it's a bit earlier because I am best in the morning. So I want to get up early, spend some time with the Lord. I ride in. I might do some exercise on the way, and I start early because my best thinking time is that. But if it's not, I'd still want to get up early. I might want to spend some time with the Lord or have some breakfast, do something, and then get my day going. Hang out with the family if you have a family. But that's important. Like circadian rhythms are important. Again, if you're a shift work, I appreciate that. If our work schedule impedes that in some ways, I just say just try to move it. Try to move it a little bit. If you're getting up at 2 p.m. at the moment, okay, well, it's going to take a while. That's all right. If you're a student, I appreciate life. If you're an art student, you probably are getting up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But we just want to kind of bring it back as much as we can. If you're a musician, you're out late at night, okay, I appreciate. It's not a counsel of perfection. I'm just saying what could help. Yeah. But it's going to take a while. Sleep is all about habit. It's all about habit. And so if you want to avoid problems when you're 70, let's start at 20. And it might take 10 years, 15 years. So just keep working at it. We'll have times where it goes up and down. That's all right. Got young kids, then you're probably cursing me under your breath. I can understand that. Or just wait 10 other, do what you can. Yep. So this is what could be a bit of an application I think about in terms of this section. So just think about what are some activities that you think, you know what, this is good for me. I feel it's constructive. I might not love it, but I feel like it's constructive. It might be spiritual disciplines, it might be exercise, whatever. Think about what are those things. Think about enjoyable activities. That might be spiritual disciplines, it might be exercise, it might be whatever. Just things that you know, I enjoy that. What about worship activities? And then I'd want to think about when. When can you do something each day, each part of the week, each season of the year? Anyway, you could talk about that too. So that's just trying to think about how do I get a good bucket for my stress? So this is what stress is. This is what anxiety is. And to manage it, we can manage it at each step in the process. They're our things. So what are your stressors? And what action can I do to engage them? What's my thinking? What's going on in my head? I need to get that out. I need to get used to picking that, actually. There's that thought again. And then scheduling time activities that'll help you replenish your activities. Sorry I rushed. We've just got a few minutes over. I did want to throw open to questions, but if people got to go, I can appreciate that. Our time is gone. But if you have some questions, I'm happy to talk. Yeah.
You seem to have some reservations against meditation, and is there any reason why? Or?
I just know that it can be a touchy topic for Christians. Okay. And so it depends on, that word meditation is loaded. So many people hear that in different ways. And there's many different types of meditation. But I have no problems with techniques that help me to focus on God's present moment and actually to that avoids me ruminating in my living up here. So techniques that help me to focus on the present moment, where I'm enjoying God's present moment through sense experience, particularly. Techniques that help me do that, that's really good. So I can actually make that into a spiritual discipline. I'm happy to talk about that more. There's some simple things you can do about that. So you might want to call that meditation. You might call that something else. Yeah, it does it. But I just know it can be a bit of a touchy topic for people. And I do want to avoid taking something which might have buying into the whole philosophical understanding of a tradition underneath it, maybe necessarily. But actually, Like we were chatting about this just before, and I was saying, sometimes it can be a little bit of a 1 Corinthians 8, 1 Corinthians 10 issue. Sometimes if I do this type of practice, it's like eating meat sacrificed to idols. For some of us, I just don't feel comfortable. My conscience doesn't like that at all. Others of us, we might not feel like it is impacting our relationship with God. I'm able to do that to the glory of God. Maybe it's a little bit of that issue. I just know it's a bit touchy, yeah. Any other questions, or we got to?
Just before with your coffee example, do you think sometimes that it could be the other way around with your feelings and your thinking?
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, this seems very, very linear and logical. It's actually not, but just by ease of explanation. Because these things actually can impact what stressors I take on a lot. So there's interactions here, and there's interactions here, like I was saying with the spiral. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling anxious, and like I said before, and I will ask myself the question, why am I feeling anxious? And then I'll come up with a whole list of things. So actually there's reciprocal relationships going on all over the place here. But what I am trying to say is that we can intervene at any place and start there. But yeah, just for ease of understanding. Yeah. Great comment. Yeah.
No, I already asked a question.
Go for it. Yep.
No, I was just going to ask, would you consider coming back for another topic?
No.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Yep. Yeah. Last question, and then I'll throw it back to yourself, Jared. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. In your pamphlet, there's a how can I be supportive? Did we touch on that, or did I miss out?
No, I just referenced it. Yeah. So there's some things there that if you're trying to support someone who's struggling with in their fluctuations, there's just a couple of tips there. There's also some tips of maybe just what to avoid. Yeah. But yeah. So my email is on there. If there's something that's struck you that you want to ask more about, feel free to email me. That'd be great. I also want to just make this comment. If anything that what we've talked about today, it's kind of left you in a bit of a bad headspace for whatever reason, please don't leave here in that headspace. So yeah, just come and maybe talk to me about it, talk to Jared about it, but we just don't want you to leave here in a bad headspace. If you've heard me say something and it's been like that's reminded you of something bad and just feeling pretty crap about that, or if you've said something you've heard me say something, it's like that's just totally wrong, or something, please let me know. Yeah. So I'll just pass it back to you, Jared. Yeah.
Put our hands together for Grant. My quiet time this morning, I was reading in Luke chapter 5, and one of my takeaways was that God knows better than I do. So I really loved what Grant said today about, or what I heard him say was we need to preach to ourselves. We need to take what God says about us and believe that more than what we think about ourselves, because we're prone to fear. We're prone to anxiety. Right? And I think we need to know that God knows that about us. Right? So I love what you said there about we need to bring every thought captive to Christ. Yeah? Does anyone know what the shortest verse in the Bible is? Jesus wept. John 11, right? So it's in response to Lazarus dying. You may have heard it preached that Jesus wept at the death of his friend, or Jesus wept because of the reality of death in the world. I'm convinced. It says that Jesus not only wept, but he was deeply troubled. This indicates that he was really angry. Yeah. So I'm convinced that he wept and he was deeply moved and he was angry because the Son of God was standing right there and everyone was mourning. Yeah? And he wept because they didn't see reality. They were seeing darkly. They were seeing through, had these massive smudged glasses on. But the reality was that there was hope, and he was right there, and his name was Jesus. So Jesus is in the boat with us, and he wants us to see clearly. Yeah. So there was just so much gold there this morning. Thank you, Grant. Thanks for coming and blessing us this morning. So we advertised a end time of 12 o'clock. So I just want to just close us in prayer. I also feel like there might be a few more questions out there. So if anyone needs to go, if anyone wants to go, I want to encourage and affirm for you to be able to do that. But if you're willing to give us a couple of extra minutes, I think there might be a couple more questions. So if we can just throw it open to question and answers, maybe do a couple more, because I think the questions might benefit the group if you're happy with that. So how about we officially close in prayer? If anyone needs to go, that's fine, and then we can do some more questions and answers as well. Heavenly Father, we just thank you that you are in the boat with us, and thank you that even when there are legitimate storms and when there are legitimate winds and rains that could be distressing to us, that we are able to look to you and walk on the water to you, not because of anything we do, but because of what you've done. Help us to see clearly, help us to see reality, and help us to know that you are right there with us always. Thank you for the fact that you have given us minds, and you have given us bodies, and you have given us the spiritual side to what we do as well. And thank you for the skills and giftings that you've given to professionals such as Grant to be able to help us navigate through this important part of our life. We glorify you, Lord. We praise you, and help us to see clearly, help us to see the true reality that you are here with us, and we glorify your name. And it's in your powerful, precious name that we pray. Amen. So, Grant, I'll just, if you're willing, invite you back up, and then if anyone has any questions, then feel free to ask.
Yep. So if anyone has any questions I'd like to ask, it'd be great.
I have a question about like the control grid. I feel like sometimes I think I stress about things that I can control because there's so many things that I can be doing, but that's what causes the stress instead of like the other boxes. Is that like then that makes me ask the question? Then what is the purpose of the control grid? Then? Does that make sense?
Yeah. The purpose of the control grid is that sometimes the difficulty comes in that we are denying things that we could be doing. So sometimes the impact of anxiety can be paralysing. Or I absolve responsibility away from myself to someone or something else. That's why that's important. A lot of problems with anxiety comes from this area, where I'm really upset and I'm stressing about things that I can't control. Been to a football game or a basketball game, what does the umpire say? Whoa, we got, whoa. Once the umpire's made that decision, I can't control that. But then I might be really angry and I can't shoot the next basket because I'm still upset. So this is about trying to focus on what you can control and acknowledge, where am I ruminating on things that I can't control? That's often where problems come in anxiety. So that's what the control grid is geared to do. It's a simple little technique to do that. Now, if your issue is there's just so many things that I should be doing, well, the mere fact of the word should there worries me. Then I would go to this next bit and think about maybe there's an issue here with my own unrelenting standards. I can't stop unless I hit perfection, or I get 95, or I I would say maybe that's more the issue then than that. So it's then trying to figure out, well, where is it most strategic to hit that one? Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah.
Brett, with issues in society, so let's just use, we've mentioned football a couple of times, whether it's a drug incident or whether it's someone walking down the street at 4 a.m. naked or whatever it might be, often there's they'll throw the blame on mental health issues as a bit of a catch cry, and then not exclusively, but typically maybe the older generation will just say that's blaming. As a psychologist, what would be do you think that's a legitimate criticism, or is that unfair in your opinion?
Well, I'm a bleeding heart, Jared, so that's going to affect. Well, if you ask the question, I would say, now it's required that those who've been given a trust must prove faithful. I care very little, says Paul, if I am judged by you or any other human court. Indeed, I don't even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It's the Lord who judges me. Therefore, judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait till the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness. He will expose the motives of men's heart. At that time, each will receive his praise from God. Of course, that's talking about Christian workers. I would say anything that I hear on Channel 7 News or some media outlet, who knows what is going on? And so I think it's highly inappropriate for people to have such blanket statements, whether it's pro or con. I just would want to say, who am I to judge the Lord's creature? I would just be very careful because we're not making informed decisions. That's what I'd say.
Would you be able to take one or two more questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
If we've got a bit of time, would you be happy to unpack Robert's question before about a couple of comments on supporting others in our lives who might be taking responsibility?
Sure. Yep. So if we just look at those little boxes there. Okay. Yep. So just how can I be supportive? Number one, just treat the person with respect and dignity. So again, this goes a little bit to the point about the stigma. We want to keep on treating each other. So Paul says, from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. Although we did so Christ, we do so no longer. So I want to treat people with respect and dignity as a fully flourishing image bearer of Christ, image bearer of God, actually. So why not? That's really important. So yeah, I just want to treat people with dignity as they are. It's talking about if you're wanting to talk to someone about, I think you have depression. That might not be a great way into the conversation. It's probably better to talk about things that you observe. So, George, I've just noticed that you just seem to be really a lot more down than you usually are. And usually you love playing in the band on Sunday afternoon, but you just don't even seem to be enjoying that. I'm just wondering, is something going on? That's probably a much softer start-up than to be making a pronouncement about someone. So that's probably a good thing to do. When you're talking about this stuff, always focus on observable behaviour, and then reflecting that back is a way into the discussion. don't blame the person for their illness. Sometimes what happens is that we try to help and things just don't change, or they don't change quickly. And then I get frustrated with that. And then I want to blame them. But it doesn't help anyone. Offer consistent emotional support and understanding. Trying to see someone, here's three golden rules for helping a relationship. 1, unconditional love. 2, empathy. I'm trying to see the world from their perspective. And then 3, genuineness. So it's not about just being nice and not saying what you really think. Genuineness is important. But if genuineness is shared before those first 2, often it is not even heard. So unconditional love, I'm trying to understand your perspective, but then I can also say, you know what, I'm really concerned about you. I think you really should try to get some help. I can say that. I can be genuine. Or I don't like the way you just spoke to that person about that. Yeah, but I'm feeling really like my mental health's not well. Yeah, but I don't like that the way you talk. I can understand that, but I don't think that's appropriate. So you can be genuine. It's just got to be, truthy and love fully.
That's kind of what Jared was alluding to when we were worrying about the footballer. But it doesn't mean that we can't call people out. If they say, I'm working heavily to cope with my mental illness, that we don't just say, well, that's okay. Mate, it's not the way you deal with it.
That's right. And if you're talking with someone one-on-one about that, that's wholly appropriate. Yeah. But when you see it on Channel 7.
Oh yeah, that's making generalization.
Yeah.
But they may have some real issues.
Correct. Yeah.
Stamping it with a mental health, really.
That's right. The heart is deceitful. So that's right.
Sure, drug dealers are very stressed out because they're always being chased by
For the cops. Yeah.
The issue is not just helping them deal with it.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So encourage a person to talk to you. Be a good listener. We'll come back to that. Respect how the person interprets their symptoms. That's really important. I'm like, sometimes the way our memory works is it's not that good. And particularly it encodes related to emotional states. And so I can genuinely want to understand from your perspective what's really going on, even if I disagree. But that's that empathy piece again. So I can get to genuineness, but first you need to be heard. So I'd say that's really important. Give the person hope for recovery. Yep, indeed. Yep, the resurrection is coming. But just with the be a good listener, encourage a person to talk to you, beware of becoming someone's pseudo-therapist. So you're not responsible. If you haven't been trained, you don't want to be their counsellor. You want to be their friend. So we need to have appropriate boundaries. So, I can't speak to you at 3 a.m. when you're suicidal. I can't speak to you. You have Lifeline. Or how about we call police together now? But if that's a pattern, I'm not going to help you if you're looking to me to be your counsellor if I'm your mate in our small group. So be careful about be careful about a dynamic where people are then looking to you or me as their therapist, which is maybe inappropriate. You want to help them get the right help from the right person. So be a good listener, offer to listen, but just beware sometimes that because you're being open to help, sometimes people will think you've got the answers. We go back to the 3 circles there. I can help in this capacity, but I don't have expertise here. I think I will love you best if I can take you, if we can look up together, who can you call to help?
On the other hand, like when you go through that, it does really help to talk to other people about it.
100%.
Rather than just you figure it all out.
Yep. And particularly about how, like we talk about mental health impacts faith. It does. Yeah. But some of the studies around the psychology of religion say that even for mature Bible-believing Christians, 1 in 3 people report that they have a significant doubt about God, that they have never spoken about that with anyone, never told anyone. So sometimes we're fearful to talk about things because I'm afraid of what that might mean. That's sometimes the depression thing. Maybe I'm a bad Christian because I'm struggling with depression or something like that. Maybe I'm a bad Christian if I'm thinking, well, how did... So that's what I'd probably say. It's a bit of a dance, I know, but just those 3 things are really important. Unconditional love, put myself in their perspective to try to understand their world, and be genuine. I can't talk to you at 3 in the morning every night.
With the examples of automatic or distorting habits of thought, what should be the goal when you think about, like you see yourself giving yourself like a lot of shoots, odds, and I'm not sure about everyone else, but I feel like my life is driven by a lot of shoots. And when I see, even if I see myself filtering or overgeneralizing, I'd be like, I should stop.
This could be a long discussion. In a nutshell, I would say that we want to live out of our Christ-informed values, not out of our shoulds. That's a little delicate, but let me just try to unpack that a bit more. These thoughts are habitual, and particularly with high standards and shoulds and shoulds and shoulds, they're often more about socialisation and means of how do I feel good and how do I please people, and than about genuine living out my Christ values. So I want to accept maybe that I do have tendencies towards people pleasing. I do know that. And a key for me there is just being aware of it. Whenever I notice myself having those thoughts, I really should. I was asked to play guitar tomorrow at church. I play twice a month already. It's a busy weekend. I should say yes, because I want to serve. Where's that should coming from? It's not coming out of my devotion to Jesus purely. That's there. I'm just noticing what's going on here. And then I want to think about what are my core convictions in life that I really want to live out. I've got a lot. I've got a few. I want to honour Jesus. I want to have a transparent relationship with my kids. I want to have a close relationship with my spouse. I want to come alongside people, help them take the next step towards completion in Christ. Now, when I'm making that decision, which of those values am I really expressing? And which am I hamstringing? Well, it's impacting actually my family. So what I'm trying to say here is, so this is a longer, we could have a longer, there's a good book about this stuff. But basically what I'm trying to do is, I want to accept the reality that I'm going to have these habitual thoughts, probably because of my personality or how mum raised me or blah, 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 I don't care. But anyway, I'm having them. That's what I'm used to having. I want to pick it. I want to call it out and notice it. And then think about, but what are the convictions that God has laid on my... What are the convictions, actually? And I want to live out of those convictions more than out of these automatic thoughts. So Jesus says, don't worry about what you eat or what you drink and blah, 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 blah. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. You know what? I'm struggling with mental health. Do you know what I need to do? Keep on struggling with mental health and focus on living out, seeking first his kingdom. So it's not about waiting till I'm perfect to do things. I need to think about what are my values as a Christian. How do I keep living them out even in this unideal situation? That's going to lead to a better way of living. So, in 2 Corinthians 5, Paul says, talks about being in this earthly tent, but we make it our goal to please the Lord. Right, that's a value. One thing I do, forgetting what is behind, straining towards what is ahead, I press on towards God with the prize which God's coming heaven in Christ Jesus. So that's about value living, not just automatic thought living. So that's a longer discussion, I'm afraid, but yeah.
Do we have one more question?
Yeah, yeah.
This kind of links back to like thinking about Sabbath, I guess. Yeah, we didn't really touch on the worship side of it.
Yep. So just responding to God in worship. Like obviously worship in the Bible is a big picture concept. We offer our whole selves as living sacrifices. That's true, but I'm just saying what helps you turn your thoughts Godward and engage with Him in praise. That's all. So honestly for me, I know when I'm not doing well, or when I'm really pushed, when I ride in the morning, I listen to praise music. For me, that's really helpful as opposed to listening to a podcast or just having ruminating thoughts. So what helps you engage with God, relate to Him and respond to Him in praise? That's great. And so I need to be intentional about doing that myself. So that might be having a quiet time and prayer time. It might be listening to some music. It might be playing an instrument and singing Christian songs. Or it might be going for a walk in the bush. Whatever helps you, I would think about that. Yeah.
Just to kind of like push that a bit further again. I feel like in the modern culture, the also something being busy, like there's not really that uptime. How does that what would you recommend, I guess? I don't know.
Yep, I would just say in our society today, we have a unhealthy drive to productivity and doing more. And I just don't think that is God-honouring at all. Jared read Luke 5 this morning. Yeah, in Luke 5, Jesus heals this bloke. He says, don't tell anyone. Of course, he tells everyone. And it says, so the crowds would keep on coming to him. And it says, Luke 5:16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Now, if the Son of God, who's here for, I don't know, maybe 3 years to save the world, would do that, I just think we need. So you want to think about like spiritual disciplines. So if you're in a tradition where you're into spiritual disciplines, evangelicals, we have some good spiritual disciplines: a quiet time, go to church, do communion once a term or something. Spiritual disciplines. But if you're into spiritual disciplines, they're best thought of as like a vitamin to a deficient spiritual life. So if you think about how am I going in my spiritual life, where is it weak? There might be a spiritual discipline that might help you with that. So not everyone should get into spiritual disciplines by fasting. Maybe silence and solitude is a spiritual discipline we should really all be talking about in our age. Silence and solitude. That's a spiritual discipline. So I would say with the worship category, that might be worth thinking about. You can engage in that type of a way. I don't know if I answered your question there. I just blabbered on. Yeah.
Grant, speaking of spiritual disciplines, may we pray for you?
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
All right.
Yep.
Let's pray. You mind if I?
No, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for Grant. Thank you for how you've wired him. Thank you that he is loved and known by you. And thank you for how you have given him skills and that he is using them to bless your people and bless the church across Melbourne and Australia and the world. And I pray, just thank you for the mind you've given him. Thank you for who he is in Christ. and thank you for the body you've given him and how he uses that for your glory. Thank you for him coming and blessing our men this morning, and I pray that in turn you will bless Grant, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Yeah, thanks, mate. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah.